Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images. This video is based on a lot of questions I get asked about things that could be available in printers and printing but don't seem to be. Why aren't they available? Are they coming? Such as a common question, I'll address this one later. What about Canon and Epson's new A2 ink tank printers? People like things like the 8550. Canon, I'm sure, have spotted how well it does. So what's their response going to be? Now, to save you accusing me of leading you along, I don't think we're going to see anything anytime soon. But it is an interesting matter as to where they are, why they're not there. Anyway, the key answer to this is always, I'm afraid, people need to make a profit. Businesses need to make a profit. They're not there just for your benefit. That comes down to answering a lot of these things. So, a simple one, somebody says, oh, I've got such and such a printer, and I bought a big pack of cheap paper to start using it on, but I can't find any profiles. Well, duh. Why would a company that's selling cheap, aiming at a market of people who wouldn't know good quality colour if it fell on them, all right, not including you in this example, but, why are they going to put the effort into making profiles for printers that they may not even have seen? It's an expensive business making lots of printer profiles. Now, I've got an 8550, well, I say I've got an 85, Karen's got one in her office, which is the one I use. So I've made loads and loads of profiles for the 8550, knowing full well that lots of manufacturers simply won't support it because it's not worth their while. So I've made lots of these print profiles, and they're available. But why don't other people do that? Well, it's because you need to have the printers there. If you're a paper supplier, then quite reasonably, if you're a big enough paper supplier, you might get a range of printers. So you might have this one, the Canon Pro 310, you might have the older 300, you might have an 8550, you'd have the better Epson printers, certainly if you're selling better quality papers. That is a lot of money to have locked up. It's a lot of expertise required to support it. So that's why the cheap paper companies don't make profiles. Pretty obvious, really. Why should they? Their market's not aimed at it. Likewise, offering profiling services. I've had people say, Keith, you make all these profiles and things. Why don't you sell profiles? Well, the ones I do make for the reviews, I make ask for a coffee donation, that's for it, and then you can have them. I make them as part of the testing part of the reviews. But I definitely do not want to set up a profiling business because to cover my time, and it comes back as a business, profitability, and for my time, it's not worth doing it. And here's the crunch one. The people that would want the kind of quality profiles I produce and for the amount of time I take in doing them tend to be quite picky. They tend to be what would be known in the trade as high maintenance customers. It takes only one or two phone calls saying I'm not happy with this profile, etc., like that, and any profit you had on the job is out the door. It's why companies much prefer to make generic profiles. Now, some companies, I think some in the UK, Photospeed, Permajet, and a few others, will make custom profiles for you if you buy paper. Well, of course, you're buying paper off them, so they're making money that respect. You've got to consider who's going to make some money from it. It's a business like that. Actually making profiles for people is very difficult because the quality of generic profiles has got better and better as printers have got more reliable, so there's less of a market for it. Likewise, I get asked quite often for, what about monochrome printers, black and white dedicated printers? Sounds fine. All you need to do, let's say Canon decide to make a dedicated monochrome printer, they just produce an ink set. Just. Always be wary of that word just when people ask you in questions. Just produce an ink set. Of course, it needs firmware development, so it'll work in the printer. It needs development. It needs production. It needs packaging. It needs marketing. It needs distribution. It's an extra product line. Is it worthwhile for the likes of Canon to make a dedicated monochrome printer? I'm going to suggest unlikely, And when you have to go back through Canon Japan, through HQ, who are going to, the bean counters are going to go over it in detail, they're going to just chuck it straight out. Now, both Canon and Epson, I've had a working relationship with for many years, and I do discuss things with them and that. And, there is the attitude of, we know a few people would like it, but it's never going to fly as a mainstream product. That's why if you want black and white ink sets to put in printers, they're available very much as a niche product, not as the actual product itself. Likewise with the Epson 8550. Just produce a monochrome ink set to go with it, and there you go. Once again, it's got the firmware, development, support costs, software writing, all of that stuff, and there's got to be a big enough market to justify it, and there almost always isn't for something like that. Now, I mentioned monochrome ink sets. They used to be popular years ago, and people still do them. However, once again, it's a niche. The sort of people who use monochrome ink sets tend to be, once again, quite picky, quite fussy. That means if you're going to supply monochrome ink carts for a printer like this, say compatible black and white inks for a printer, or bottles of ink for 8550, if you're going to do that, you better have a fairly well-designed support process you're going to offer. And of course that support process, despite all the sort of the wonders of, AI can do this, etc., etc., no, it can't. Well, not for foreseeable future. It needs genuine human experience. My heart drops every time I get an email off somebody who said, I was wondering about such and such. I asked, pick AI system of your choice, and it said, and I get a verbatim, a chunk of text. The worst ones are so bad they're not even wrong, and the rest, they have little patches of relevance in them, patches of truth, and the occasional glaring untruth in them. When you're talking about expertise like that, you can only train these systems if the expertise is there to be trained on. And there is so much garbage on the internet already that you would have to be very careful in your training for it. But in real terms, in having a business that sells black and white ink cartridges, for example, you need somebody at that business who truly understands the product, who could truly answer questions and things. Now, I've tinkered with stuff like this in the past, and it is only that, it's tinkering, because it's part of my general sort of looking at printers, photography, and it benefits my photography in a roundabout way. Architectural photography is what pays my wages. This, yes, it is somewhat of a hobby, but it is one that actually works, and it's part of the marketing for our actual business. So yeah, it comes down to that bit there. Somebody has to make a profit. Our business has to make a profit. The fact that I enjoy this sort of stuff, and it verges, some of it is very much on the hobby side of it, doesn't really matter, because it still comes under the auspices of the business, and that you always have to look at it. So as well as I mentioned that experience, you've also stock to consider. If I'm going to sell monochrome ink cartridges, and I've got the expertise and the software, not to be neglected that, to do that in one of these, I've got to have stock to be able to supply it to people. That takes up space. That stock has, if it's inks, has a limited lifetime. Now, inks are nowhere near as limited usually as you think, and I know many people buy printers, buy used ink carts, and not used ink carts, out of date ink carts, take the ink out and put them into, if you want to save money at that level, then yeah, that's something you can do, and I know plenty of people do it. But if you're running a proper business, then no, you have to make sure that your ink doesn't go out of date and things like that. You need a sufficient volume. It's a niche market. You need people not only in your business to handle the tech support of it, but you need to add it to your inventory. You need to add it to other things you do. So it needs to be part of your business. And any good business looks at the parts of its business pretty regularly and says, which one of these are making us money? Which ones are costing us money? Is that cost worthwhile from a marketing point of view? Is it a loss leader in some way? Or is it something that really, do we want to be in this business? And that, coupled with, for black and white, the improving quality of black and white out of the box for a printer like this or the 8550, that is why you don't get things like that. Oh, incidentally, I mentioned cheap papers earlier. Don't stop when you get a new printer like this. Don't economize on cheap paper. Get, even if it's only an A4 pack or something like that, of some OEM, so Canon paper, Epson paper for the 8550. Get some paper like that, because if you just put cheap paper in, probably with no profiles, as I mentioned, how are you going to tell whether the fact the picture looks awful is because there's something wrong with the printer, something wrong with your software, or just you are plain inept at taking good pictures? Yeah, how are you going to know? You'd hope that you're fairly confident if you get to the point of printing, but you don't know. So minimize variables. So at least when you buy a printer like this, buy some Canon paper to go with it. Epson printer, buy some Epson. Even if it's just a basic A4 pack of something like Epson Premium Semi-Gloss for the 8550. That's a starting point for it. But anyway, that profitability bit should give you a clue. When I say where are Epson's new A2 ink tank printers, because I get asked, when's this going to be replaced? This is 5 years old. P900, P700 are of similar vintage. The 300 of this was of similar vintage, but got a bit of an update. There's a few changes with the 310 here. But where are the ink tank printers? Well, for those, yes, they could make them, but they're not going to. And the simple thing is that when it comes down to it, a printer like the 8550 here, this 8550 that Karen's got next door, the fact that it is as good as it is, I'm not going to say a mistake, but I'm sure that it has seriously impacted sales of higher end printers, the more professional printers. 700, 900 and larger ones, not large, significantly large ones, but certainly it has impacted them because of the cost of running. Now, you and I might say, well, there you go. That shows you if you took your professional printers and made them ink tank printers like that, you'd sell more. Yeah, maybe. But you're fighting against different internal divisions of companies that all have different profit centers and things. Now, that goes probably for Epson. It probably goes for Canon as well. If you look at their ink tank printers, they're currently limited to A4. And if you're a Mac user like I am, they've got no functional color management because they insist on using AirPrint. So you've got, I wouldn't say useless printers, but for a Mac user who wants to do high quality, there's nothing there. There's no proper drivers for them. Until you come to something like this with its ink cartridges, its smaller ink cartridges. Now, will this situation persist? I think, there's going to come a point where whether it be something like the 8550 or another ink tank printer like that just does so much more for what you pay and the running costs are so much lower, it's going to put pressure. I'm sure Canon have seen how well the 8550 have done. Other parts of Epson have seen how well the 8550 has done. Now, don't get me wrong, the 8550 is not a commercial printer, as people who try using it commercially find out. If you are going to print thousands and thousands of prints on a printer like that, then you're going to run into problems with it. I know somebody who's on their third one, but the two previous ones failed at about the 13,000 print mark after a year. You think that's not many prints, and then you do the calculations, you think, hang on, 13,000 prints in a year. That means that some days, because it won't have been continuous, some days that printer has been working solid all day long. They are not designed for that sort of, they are home office printers. You want a commercial printer? Buy a commercial printer. Somebody said to me many years when I was talking to them about tuning up cars and things, they said, you want a fast car? Buy a fast car. There's a limit to how much you can just sort of tweak stuff safely and reliably, and that's the question. And it works with printers as well. Would I like to see an ink tank version of this? God, I'd love it. An ink tank version of this 310 would be absolutely superb. Are Canon going to do it? No time soon. I think we may see it, but don't expect replacements for any of these in the next year or so that significantly changes that. As I say, it's not because they can't be done, Because it comes right back to that first thing I said, because they are businesses and they have to make a profit. Now, you might not like that, and certainly for smaller printers, where replacement cartridges cost as much as buying a new printer, then that market has seriously damaged the higher up market, because people have the skepticism, rightfully so, towards, and I'm going to say some of the likes of HP, some of the other makes of printers in the past, that really have been, you buy them, the inks run out. Oh, one colour ink has run out. Oh, sorry, all three inks are in a colour inks are in a cartridge together, so you need a whole new cartridge. Stuff like that people do not like, rightly so. That's why ones like this has a separate cartridge for each colour. So yes, it could be done. I can see why people ask for it, but I'm sorry, nothing's going to happen in the next year or so. I could be surprised. Canon could contact me next March and say, Keith, we've got a new ink tank printer coming out that does this, 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 and this. Would you like to look at it? Yes, I would like to look at it. Do I think I'm going to be doing it? Probably not. Anyway, there you go. That's why always when you ask for stuff, please do remember that these companies are not just doing this stuff as a service to you out the goodness of their hearts. You can criticise how much profit they make, but that's the way the things work. Anyway, I hope that's been of interest. Thanks for watching. Please do keep those questions coming in, because the questions are what give me ideas for videos, and also tell me what people are concerned about and what they want to hear about. So thanks again. Bye.